And good morning, everybody. I think we should be live, at least. I sure hope so. Let me see if this is actually working. Not yet. Not yet. Here we go. A stream has started. And I can hear myself, so wonderful. Good morning on this 27th of January, 2025. Well, time of interest, as some people would say. How are you guys doing? And yeah, I hope you had a good weekend. I certainly got through it better than I thought I would, all things considered, at least in some ways. We did the live stream on Saturday. I certainly had a lot of fun. I know some of you who usually show up here during sprints in the morning, also were there. And thank you very much. I do appreciate that. Yeah, I did in fact manage to finally record that video for On Stranger Tides up to a standard where I'm at least not completely unhappy with publishing it, which is what I did yesterday. So the next video will be one on Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. I'll try to record it tonight so I can put it up tomorrow or Wednesday, or at least have a first go at it and then realize what to do about it the next day, because it's the kind of book where I feel I could potentially need more than one go before getting it fully right, because there's so much going on in that book. So that's certainly something I'm gonna work on later today. Hey Ori, good morning. How are you doing? So yeah, video for Death of the Author is something that I'll work on today. I already started writing down stuff on Friday, right? I did already start building sort of like a structure for the video. I'll certainly have a look at that again this morning, and then hopefully I can, sort of have the whole thing in my brain and kind of mull it over a while at the gym, and then I know what I'll do this evening or this afternoon when I record the video. I'm still reading Red Plenty by Francis Spufford, but I'm getting closer to the end. I'll definitely finish that one probably on the way on the bus to the gym or shortly thereafter. It's an interesting book in what it does and how it does it. I think for me, what was really fascinating is how similar some bits are to the way Neil Stephenson sometimes writes, which is the very, very detailed description of one specific mechanical process or something. There's a chapter in Red Plenty. It's somewhere in part 2, chapter 2 of the second part, I think, where that is all about computers, like very early computers that still work with vacuum tubes and everything, and it's just like really well done in that you have sort of like these descriptions of how an actual how that kind of computer works and how the current is jumping from like one tube to the next and then so forth, and how that builds like a program, and how computers actually work on that level, which is something obviously I had to learn in computer science class at university. When we did actually, for one course, we did, at least for a couple of weeks, we had to try and program like actual registers of a processor, and then go up one stage up and do the whole thing in assembly language and so forth. So reading the chapter on that level is just like was like an interesting sort of like a flashback for me. But he kind of intersects that with the thoughts of the programmer and developer of like sort of computers and an inventor who's working on that machine, and how sort of like his life follows this like same kind of loops and slow increments that the program does follow, and how that sort of like describes life in the USSR at the same level. So pretty good similes there, I would argue, but also just like really well done. And you learn a lot about like vacuum vacuum tube computing in the mid 1950s. So there's that. And yeah, so interesting book certainly, and Not the last book by Francis Bufford I'm going to read, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I will read Golden Hill. I've heard good things about the novel, a lot of it, in fact. Even was mentioned in the Gresham lecture on historical fiction that I watched yesterday. Golden Hill was also mentioned there. And yeah. Oh, and of course, I did give it as a Christmas present to my mother, so I will have to read it at some point so I can talk with her about the book. And yeah. Yeah, or I guess in general, yes, because and this is why this is historical fiction. Also, he's not just like Lebedev was not just not just a programmer, but someone who had to navigate Soviet life while working for the military and developing military technology. And I think at that point you have to be somewhat introspective if you want to stay alive, at least at least as long as Stalin was still around. So I guess he was forced to be introspective despite his better nature. I don't know, but yeah. Good morning, Britain, and that's progressive as not progressive, productive if ever I've seen it. Already writing on the second book of your fantasy saga. Did you already self-publish the first one, or is it still in revision and everything? Because I mean, I know you write, but I've never seen you promote your books, so I assume you haven't published any of them either, self-publish or mainstream or in any other way. But yeah, maybe a good idea to get some sleep for you as well, because I guess for you classes start in a couple of hours, right? I mean, it's just like what I believe. Still in revisions, all right. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I mean, like during the first sprints, obviously I'm going to check like comments and stuff, do the whole admin things, and then look at the structure for Death of the Author, and see what else comes up. Apparently, there was some. I already saw some booktubers are getting not involved, but try to stay uninvolved with political issues at the moment. I watched a video by Dan Explorer's books who did like a bunch of Malazan videos, and he said that he would step back from doing booktube for now because of all the politics stuff. Which I found sad. I mean, I obviously disagree with his stance on politics, but that's I'm still sad that he decided that this is that rather than engaging in political debate, he'd rather step back from doing content. Like, I mean, I kind of get it. It's certainly it's tempers are running high, I guess, at the moment. But I feel, especially if the kind of books you are reading are books like the Malazan Book of the Fallen and stuff like that, which is fairly upfront in when it comes to at least some elements of political thought and so forth. As a booktuber, not engaging with that, I always feel is well understandable, also lamentable, because you can't read those books and go, no, there's no politics in there. And if people talk about politics, that's a problem. And beyond anything else, there's always the idea is like, I don't like people calling Trump voters Nazis, and yeah. But then there's Elon doing whatever Elon is doing, and you should call that for what it was. That doesn't mean like anyone who voted for Trump, that everyone who voted for Trump is a diehard Nazi. That's obviously not true. But if you can't call things the things they clearly are, how are you going to engage with that on that level, right? And it's kind of frustrating. It's a complicated situation, and I feel like the booktube community at large, at least some of parts of it, will have to sort of come to terms with the fact that this illusion that politics are not what we are doing when we talk about books, when we decide which books to talk about and all of that, this illusion that a lot of people have sort of like labored under for the last couple of years, I think that will have to will get stripped away more and more, and then I guess we'll have some people who just like become more and more how can I say this? I don't want to say ridiculous, but it feels who's sort of like insistence on avoiding anything political will feel more and more absurd in the face of things going on. But it's too early to say who will do what in that kind of environment. It may also just lead to more people stepping away from this community and doing something else, which is, you know, it's its own thing. That one, the one where he explains how he does characterization. I think it's a really good one. I found it really interesting. That was back in the day when Erikson wrote that one, and Daniel Green then read the essay and went like, "Oh, first I thought Erikson was wrong. Now I realize Erikson was right," and all of that. I think even without having read the Malazan Book of the Fallen, there's a long list of essays that Erikson has written. Some of them are on his website. A lot of them are on his Facebook profile, which is, you know, unfortunate because it kind of makes him harder to find. But a lot of these essays are just genuinely really interesting and helpful, both for understanding what the Malazan Book of the Fallen does, but also just generally good insight on different approaches to writing and being a writer and so forth. Which obviously, I mean, Erikson has said that he's working on a nonfiction book on writing that he calls The Ritual of Writing, I think. I haven't seen like any firm date for that, but I guess it'll contain a lot of these essays just like in a reworked format. So that's certainly something I'm looking forward to, because whatever else you may think about the Malazan Book of the Fallen or anything else that Erikson has written, he's clearly someone who has spent a lot of time thinking about creative writing. Obviously, I mean, he has a degree in that whole subject, right? He knows a lot of stuff about that, and he has a way with words. So having sort of like his take on that might just be interesting to read, no matter what else you want to do with that. Hey, Kale, how you doing? Good afternoon down there. How are you doing? Yeah, so a lot of these essays are interesting. Some are obviously more Malazan specific. There's the whole Karsa Orlong and the problem of Karsa Orlong, or whatever it's called, where he talks about writing a barbarian character and relating that to Conan the Barbarian and stuff like that. And that's obviously also like an interesting essay, but it kind of requires you to have it read all the way up to the first part of book 4, House of Chains of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So might be a while for you to get there, Britain. Oh, that's right. It's already Monday afternoon for you, Kale. So you already went to that Monday working, which, although, do you have to work on Sunday as well in Australia? I'm kind of, as like Germany has a fairly strict policy on who has to work on Sunday, and that's, you know, retail stores and so forth is closed on Sundays. Obviously, gastro stuff is open on Sundays, and some heavy industry that works in shifts and has like large machinery works on Sundays, but everyone else has like an actual weekend, which, you know, it's a pretty good thing. So I'm always when I'm talking to friends and I'm like, no, I'm going to do this on Sunday. It's like, wait, you can do this. And just to be fair, just to be clear, I think it's a good idea to have I mean, either to have I mean, it's a good thing to have like a 5-day or whatever it is, 35 to 40-hour work week, maybe even less. And if you can manage that with also having, you know, other people work on Sundays, I'm totally fine because clearly it's a nice thing if you can go and buy stuff on Sunday. If you have been working all week and so on, all of that, I totally get that. But on the other hand, I think it's more important to not make people work 7 days a week. So there's that. It's just like one of those fun things where in Germany, on the one hand, whether you have this weird alliance between, or have had for like the longest time, this weird alliance between unions, labor unions, and and the remaining more religious conservative side of things, both insisting on a work-free Sunday, some for religious reasons, some for just like the labor reason of wanting, obviously wanting to have like a 5 or 6 day week only, and that's just interesting how you could at the time be sort of like build these alliances around specific topics and specific issues. And obviously now in the year 2025, there's not that many like organized religious conservatives on that level that have that kind of pull in Germany, and obviously labor unions also have like much less pull. So that's more like inertia at this point, I guess. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Monday to Friday. Yeah, I have not yet, looked at like the broader news, which is something I try to do like once in the morning, and then I'm depressed for the rest of the day. But maybe that's also something I'll do during the first sprints. Speaking of, it is a quarter past. Shall we do our first sprints, and then I'll be back at the top of the hour. In this case, I guess, Britain, I wish you more success with writing on your second book. And then, of course, a good night, because I assume you'll be going to bed before I come back. And yeah, I will see you in 45 minutes. And I am back. How did you guys do? Did you get stuff done? I certainly did get through all the emails, all the comments, all of that stuff. And yeah, I even scrolled through news headlines and decided that, yes, that's really, really depressing on a lot of levels. Yeah, well, what can you do, right? It's going to be bad. It's going to get worse. And I am not exactly sure what to do about it. Those German elections are shaping up to be really fucked up. And yeah, it's not exactly a fun place to be. But I guess that's just the timeline we're living in right now. So nothing much to be done there, I guess. So yeah, trying to get be positive again, I guess. No, at least I'm sort of up to date with like comments and everything on YouTube videos. Let's see if anyone is actually interested, or how many people are actually interested in those pirate videos. The On Stranger Tides video is up. It's going somewhere, but it's kind of difficult to gauge those kind of things. I feel like generally, obviously, right now people are not necessarily focused on BookTube things, or at least not on specific books, and not necessarily on older books. So there's all of that, but yeah, it's not much I can do about it at this point. I'm always like, thinking about this and seeing how the kind of person I am and how I interact with people makes it very difficult for me to sort of um, be seen as part of the larger BookTube community. And I think some people obviously see me as that, but a lot of people who are, popular and so forth don't. And I kind of understand why, because sometimes I get somewhat emphatic about my opinions on, and that's something that we have decided to not accept in the larger BookTube community, except for like one or two people who can totally get away with it, but they're not me. But I'm not gonna, don't want to complain about anything here, but it's more like something that I think we will see more of, that sort of like polarization, what with, politics being the kind of politics they are now, and are going to stay for the next couple of years at least, that will lead more and more people to either become more vocal in their politics because they feel that they are either on the winning side or on the side of power at the moment. So I'm sure we'll see more people being outwardly less caring, or uh, being more openly dismissive of people who criticize certain books for their, say, levels of sexism or racism or whatever that's in there, because they feel they are on the side of power. The old white men and readers that read stuff written for old white men will feel that they have the right of it. They are going to be more about that in a lot of ways, and then will obviously claim that anything criticizing them is, of course, either woke or just evil and politics and so forth. And then you will have people that will go the other way and become more actively political in their criticism of things, because seeing how the world runs right now, and if you are someone who is somewhat marginalized in any way or form, whether it's having some form of chronic illness or disability, or being somewhere on the LGBTQ spectrum, or being someone with a migrant status or anything of the sort, you are constantly under pressure at this point. And there's two ways of doing that. One is like not saying anything, and the other one is being very loud and aggressive and fighting back. And some people on the internet will do that. Some of those will be on BookTube. So we will have that conflict. And then we'll have a lot of people who will just like step away from it, because books and entertainment have always been sort of like the one escapism to not have to deal with the world. And there's obviously the people that need to escape because, once again, they're marginalized in one way or another. And need just like space to recover from the very real sort of pressure and discrimination that they face every day on the streets and in at jobs, school, whatever, and they just can't handle that, and that's incredibly depressing and sad. And then there's people who don't want to confront it because while they know it's kind of bad, they are still privileged enough in a lot of ways that it doesn't touch them in their real life, and not real life, like in their physical life and job, university, and so forth. And being confronted with it online is then obviously a drag on their emotional well-being in a lot of ways, and that's the next side of people stepping away from it. And I think that's bad for like book discourse as a whole. It's obviously incredibly bad for the people that need more support, that need help, and so forth. If they can't get that from BookTube anymore, but I suspect that's kind of what we'll get in a lot of ways. And I for one, I'm certainly not sure where, say, the more fantastic side of BookTube will settle on that part, because so far my experience is that most of the more successful, larger, popular, whatever you want to call it, people in this space try to avoid saying anything. And if that continues, it's certainly something that will make me not exactly more happy, because I already know that like what will happen is that I will be probably more and more angry, because that's just like how I interact with the world. Good morning, Brick and Spines. How you doing? That is nice to hear, the Brick and Spines. Yes, but that's the thing. Like those kind of conversations, chatting with Nuts, one on the Dr. Fantasy on Philip Chase's channel, those are like 2-3 years old by now. And that larger part of BookTube is certainly not trying to associate with me anymore, for all kinds of reasons. And I do get part of those reasons, certainly do. But it's such a thing. It's a thing. I feel like a part is also that BookTube is very American. This part of BookTube is very American, and I'm not. And that means that like there's cultural differences in like the way I interact, the way I say things, the possibly the bluntness where I just like overlook certain cultural norms or not, because the things that I feel comfortable saying or not saying are very different from what someone in any other like cultural background would deem fine to say or not fine to say, and that leads to certainly to conflict. And I don't fault anyone for rather not having me on their channel because I'm angry and all of that. I totally get that. It's just something I notice from time to time, right? I mean, that's the other thing. Like a lot of this is not, I wouldn't call it clicky. It's more like, since it is a social form, right? YouTube is social media, whether you want to call it that or not, but it kind of is that. And friendships just form, and some people having similar backgrounds and so forth, same age, growing up in the same kind of place and so rough place, will lead to friendships in a way that are harder to sort of build if the cultural differences are larger. And there's that's just like something that it's totally normal, is the point. And but I feel, as I said, like I think that a lot of these cliques, or not necessarily cliques, but that BookTube will sort of like fracture more along those lines, because society is getting worse. And you already see like the last couple of weeks, ever since like last summer, I would argue, and definitely since the US elections, I see more reactionary, conservative BookTube content showing up in my recommendations. People attacking Brandon Sanderson for whatever he did in Wind and Truth, which is apparently totally gay, which is good. Don't get me wrong, right? No, having that, people obviously starting to, hey, defend J.K. Rowling again, and you can see those people being more confident now that they feel that they have power on their side, and that's something that will continue to happen. And I'm sure there's larger booktubers who have stayed away from saying such things too overtly by now until now, who may sort of not pivot towards that more, but like slowly move towards that, say things that they felt they weren't allowed to say before, because now they can, be out there and say them again. I'm, I'm sure there's going to be people who will then turn away, and pressure will lead to fractures, is how I would define that, I guess. And we'll see how all of that shakes out. Obviously, there's far bigger problems in the world right now than who is talking to whom and about whom on BookTube. So that's like the main thing there, and we'll see where that goes. I'm just somewhat sort of disillusioned with everything, and reading the news, seeing where Germany's heading with our elections coming up in 3 weeks. It's not a good place. Makes me very angry. Makes me very frustrated. Sometimes that certainly intensifies how I see things, and that doesn't necessarily make me more popular, I would argue. I think, yeah, I'm wrestling with that as well, like with how I phrase things, with how I sometimes, whether I, went too far and being too angry about something or not. And obviously I question these kind of things all the time. And that's just like the place I'm in at the moment. And we'll see where that goes, how far I go down the, well, then fuck them all road, and whether I try to not do that, or I don't know what to do about that. It's certainly something I've been thinking about, is like whether I should go and join something like Matt on Books Sunday Pub, or whether I'm still welcome there, or whether I'm seen as like an irritant in a lot of ways, and whether it's worth my energy being that irritant, in the hopes that maybe some people will actually listen to what I say, or whether people are just like tired of me saying the same kind of things again and again. And yeah, I don't know what to do about that. It's a complex situation, I guess. Yeah, exactly, Breckenspeth. I mean, that's just like natural, because for better or worse, people living in, say, continental Europe, for example, or yeah, obviously people in America before that, but like the part of the world that can ignore all the bad shit happening is getting smaller and smaller in a lot of ways, and I think that leads to more and more people getting, talking about those kind of things, and that's when the always there political kind of becomes overtly political and becomes visible in a lot of ways, and that's just something that can't be avoided. The question is usually what we do with that, and whether we, actually decide to do more than just yell at each other in comment sections, all of that stuff, I think. And that's, I don't know where all of this will be going. It's not necessarily a nice place to be, though. And I suspect that, yeah, it will touch every community in one way or another. And I think we're at this sort of like it's not a tipping point per se, because it's too slow a process, but we're certainly in a transformatory stage of the larger booktube, after which kind of makes sense, right? You had this whole sort of like bubble of booktube starting around the pandemic, where everyone was stuck at home and had time to read and talk about it on the internet, because that's like the only way we could talk to each other, because everyone was in lockdown and all that. And that was like when you had lots and lots and lots and lots of booktube channels starting and growing relatively fast. It was a boom for like book content on the internet, on BookTok, but also on BookTube, and a lot of us got their start around that. And since the pandemic was officially declared over, and yes, of course, since everyone decided to no longer worry about COVID, except for those people who, either have long COVID or are immunocompromised and still need to really, really, really be scared about it all the time. Um, Engagement has gone down. Fewer people spend their time. People do other activities again. So views are going down. People are changing their interest again and moving to other places. But there was no like real decisive thing, right? It was more like a slow sort of fading to like what to just like slow fading in a lot of ways. But the basic formula for content remained the same. People were making the same kind of content, thinking about the same kind of things, saying the same kind of things, just not getting the same kind of like reaction because there were fewer people there. And I think what we're seeing now is sort of like the next sort of like the next stage where like external circumstances, what with the new Trump administration, the different elections in Europe where far right parties are gaining power, all of these things coming to a head, that bringing up new sort of external circumstances that make it very difficult, that are very difficult to ignore, and that will impact each and every one of us in one way or another, and that will change how people interact with social media, even on BookTube. So I think that's sort of maybe what's happening, and we'll see how that goes. But certainly troubling times. I'm obviously always also talking about climate change, Kale. Yes, that's like one of the longer ones that is certainly going to get worse. And a lot of the parties currently gaining power are obviously parties that are not exactly doing anything about climate change that will help in any way, shape, or form. So shit will get worse. Yeah, there's been like like a retrenchment along those lines, and it's incredibly reactionary and angry in a lot of ways, and that's obviously a bad thing. Yeah, breaking spines. I know, but that's just like I feel like a certain level of irony does not exactly do. It's not does no harm there. It's actually beneficial in that regard. But speaking of all of that, let's maybe do the second sprint of 45 minutes roughly, and I'll be back at the top of the hour, which means I can get the earlier bus to the gym, and that's that's half an hour more time doing stuff later, which is all for the good, I guess. So yeah, I'll talk to you in like 45 minutes. And I am back. How did you do? Did you get stuff done? I certainly did. Not as much as I wanted to, but that's the world we live in. And this is, why I do this every morning, because even if I don't get everything done, at least I get something done, and that's something. And I did open the file of the work in progress thing that I'm writing on, and I did read through some of it and made a few adjustments and some of that stuff. And obviously, the danger with writing on a computer is that there's always a temptation of starting to re-edit and whatnot while you're still technically supposed to write, which is, I guess, where using a typewriter or something like that helps. But in this case, since it's been a while since I worked on it, I figured I'd have to read at least the last couple of sentences to see where things are going, and I encountered some typos and stuff where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to fix this right now because otherwise, why not? Right? It's not a big distraction, but it certainly is a distraction. I guess it's just like something I need to watch, because of course the temptation to procrastinate by doing this instead of continuing to write is very, very much a real thing, especially for someone like me. But that's a problem for the future, like most of them. Anyway, I'll be heading out to the gym, and then I will be doing obviously the weekly update thing later today, and then I'll be talking. Then I'll hopefully start work on the Death of the Author video. That's kind of roughly the plan. I don't think I have like anything else at the moment. Let's all try and get through the day, and let's hope things won't be super bad for once. Wouldn't that be a nice change of pace after last week? Not that I'm, particularly optimistic, but maybe sometimes hope is all we have. So yeah, sorry, this one was a bit more on the depressed side of things. I usually try not to go too far with this in these sprints in the morning, but sometimes it's hard to not do that. So yeah, hopefully things will be brighter tomorrow. That's a good way, right? Anyway, thanks for hanging out anyway, and I'll see you very soon somewhere else.